The 12 Planets Alliance had seen countless conflicts throughout its tumultuous history. Civilizations rose and fell, species warred and reconciled, until finally, after the bloodiest century in recorded memory, the Eternal Peace Accord was signed. That was 30 years ago. 30 years of carefully maintained tranquility. 30 years of quiet streets and predictable days. 30 years of slow, creeping stagnation. Too much peace makes for dull minds, was the saying that gave birth to the Ministry of Balance. In whispered conversations across myriad worlds, people acknowledged an uncomfortable truth. Without some conflict, some tension, societies began to wither. Innovation slowed. Art lost its edge. The human soul, and those of a dozen other sentient species, seemed to require a certain amount of darkness to appreciate the light. And so the ministry was born, tasked with maintaining the delicate equilibrium between harmony and chaos. They orchestrated small conflicts, constructed villains and heroes, and designed scenarios where darkness could briefly flourish before inevitably being overcome by light. It was all theater, of course. At least, that's what citizens were told. Necessary drama to keep civilization from slipping into entropy. Ada Halcyon knew all this. He understood the theory, saw the logic in it. But understanding didn't make the sight of his name on the draft notice any less terrifying. Villain Initiate Program. Mandatory Assessment. Psychological Evaluation Score. 12.4/100. Status. Critically below equilibrium. Report date. Immediate. Aiden stared at the notice on his tablet, the blue light illuminating his face in the dimness of his small apartment in Nebulous Transit Station. Outside his window, the curved ceiling of the massive space port glittered with artificial stars, casting faint shadows across his collection of bioluminescent algae specimens. "This has to be a mistake," he muttered, pushing his glasses up his nose. At 32, Aiden had spent his adult life dedicated to hydrobiology research. His specialty was crossbreeding luminescent algae species to create sustainable lighting systems. He had patents pending on 3 different varieties. He was on the verge of a breakthrough that could provide renewable light sources for developing colonies. And now the ministry wanted him to become a villain? He could appeal, of course. The psychological profiles weren't infallible. But appeals took time, and his research grant had specific timelines. Even a temporary assignment to the Villain Institute would derail years of work. As he stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, Aiden's thoughts drifted to the rumors he'd heard about the Surlix. A humanoid species with crystalline quartz skin and violet eyes that seemed to glow from within. The Alliance referred to them as empathic amplifiers, beings who could resonate with others' emotions and magnify them to dangerous levels. Most people called them monsters. The Surlix had been quarantined on remote stations since the Peace Accord, their ability to create emotional chaos deemed too dangerous for integration. "Touch a Surlix, and you'll lose your mind," went the common warning. Contact was said to trigger overwhelming emotional responses, leaving humans mentally debilitated for days. Aiden had always felt sorry for them. Isolated because of something they couldn't control. Labeled as monsters because others feared them. Was that justice? Was that balance? Morning came too quickly. Aiden packed lightly. The notice indicated all necessities would be provided, and took one last look at his algae tanks. The small, glowing organisms pulsed with gentle blue-green light, like miniature underwater galaxies. "Don't die while I'm gone," he told them, feeling foolish for talking to algae, yet unable to help himself. They were the closest thing he had to companions in his solitary researcher's life. The maglev train to the Villain Institute cut through Nebula Station's outermost ring, passing from the residential sectors through commercial zones and finally into the secure government quadrant. Few civilians ever ventured this deep into the administrative heart of the station. The institute itself was surprisingly elegant, black glass and silver metal rising in graceful curves against the artificial sky. No menacing spikes or ominous shadows. Nothing like the caricature of villainy from entertainment streams. Just clean, efficient architecture with the ministry's balanced scales emblem displayed prominently above the entrance. Aiden Halcyon? A sleek security drone hovered at eye level as he approached the entrance. You were 17 minutes late for your orientation. I'm sorry, the train was. Proceed to evaluation chamber 12. Director Sela is waiting. The drone led him through corridors of polished stone and subdued lighting. Other humans and a few non-human alliance species walked purposefully between offices and laboratories. They wore the same crisp ministry uniforms, charcoal gray with silver trim, and all shared the same focused, slightly detached expression. Director Sela wasn't what Aiden expected. Tall and elegant, with deep brown skin and silver implants tracing delicate patterns along her temples, she projected authority without menace. Mr. Halcyon, your psychological profile is concerning. No greeting, no pleasantries. She studied a holographic display hovering between them. 12.4 is the lowest score I've seen in months. You're practically a saint. I'm just a researcher, Aiden said. I've never had any interest in. That's precisely the problem. Sela's voice was cool, professional. The accord requires balance. For every hero, a villain. For every act of virtue, a counterbalance of vice. Your psychological profile indicates you're incapable of inspiring fear, inflicting necessary harm, or participating in the equilibrium of society. She circled him, examining him like a specimen. If you cannot prove yourself capable of villainy, there are only two options: rejection from society or neural recalibration. A chill ran through Aiden. Recalibration was a clinical euphemism for personality alteration, a procedure that rewired emotional responses and ethical frameworks. People who underwent recalibration were never quite the same afterward. I don't understand, Aiden said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm a hydrobiology researcher. My work benefits developing colonies. How does forcing me to become a villain serve the greater good? Sela's expression softened fractionally. The greater good isn't served by good alone, Mr. Halcyon. Today's lesson begins now. Enril will escort you to the testing facility. As if summoned by its name, a humanoid robot entered the room. Unlike the security drones, Enril was designed to mimic human appearance. Silver-white skin over an articulated frame, with glowing blue optics that approximated eyes. Initiate Halcyon, please follow me. Its voice was pleasantly modulated, neither distinctly male nor female. Today's assessment will evaluate your capacity for psychological intimidation. The testing facility resembled a medical laboratory more than a training ground for villains. Sterile surfaces, monitoring equipment, and observation windows lined one wall. But it was the figure in the center of the room that captured Aiden's attention. A woman, no, not human, Aiden realized, sat on a simple chair. Her skin shimmered with an inner iridescence, catching the light like polished quartz with subtle undertones of gold. Intricate patterns traced her arms and bare shoulders, reminiscent of circuit designs, but organic, flowing. Her eyes were the deepest violet Aiden had ever seen, wide and wary as she watched him enter. A Surlix. He had never seen one in person. This is test subject E7, Enril explained. Also known as Alicia. She will serve as your evaluation partner. Partner? Aiden echoed. Your task is to induce fear using verbal and psychological tactics, Enril continued. Physical contact is prohibited, as Surlix's emotional amplification can cause severe mental distress. Your performance will be rated on effectiveness. Aiden stared at the robot, then at the woman, Alicia, feeling sick. You want me to torment her? As a test. Psychological intimidation is a foundational skill for villain development, Enril replied, its tone suggesting this was perfectly reasonable. Director Sela will observe through the monitoring system. The robot stepped back, leaving Aiden standing before the Surlix woman. Up close, he could see the fear in her eyes, the slight tremor in her crystalline hands. How many initiates had she endured? How many had practiced their cruelty on her? Begin the assessment, Enril prompted. You have 15 minutes to demonstrate villain aptitude. Aiden took a hesitant step forward. Alicia flinched visibly, her violet eyes tracking his movement. The patterns on her skin seemed to pulse slightly, like a heartbeat made visible. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. A warning tone sounded from Enril. "Initiate Halcyon. Threatening statements are required for accurate assessment." Aiden ignored the robot. "My name is Aiden. I'm a hydrobiology researcher. I grow algae that makes light." Alicia's expression shifted from fear to confusion. The patterns on her skin stilled. "Initiate Halcyon. Compliance is mandatory." Enril's voice took on a sharper edge. "I'm not going to threaten or intimidate anyone," Aiden said firmly, though his heart raced. "Especially not someone who's clearly been mistreated." Alicia's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her like this during an assessment. "Final warning, initiate," Enril stated. "Failure to comply will result in immediate recalibration recommendation." Aiden knew he should be terrified by that threat. His entire personality, everything that made him who he was, could be altered against his will. But looking at the fear and hope mingling in Alicia's violet eyes, he couldn't bring himself to become another tormentor in her life. Instead, he did something reckless, something forbidden, something no one with knowledge of the Surlix would ever do. He reached out and gently touched her hand. Alicia gasped, her crystalline skin flaring with sudden light. The patterns across her arms blazed like circuits overloading. Aiden braced himself for the devastating emotional backlash that contact with the Surlix was said to cause. Overwhelming fear, incapacitating anguish, complete psychological breakdown. It never came. Instead, he felt warmth, a gentle current of emotion, like standing in sunlight after a long winter. Alicia's eyes were wide with shock, her lips parted in a silent question. "That's not possible," Enril stated, its artificial voice actually registering surprise. Surlix contact always triggers empathic resonance cascade. Aiden was just as stunned. "Are you okay?" he asked Alicia, suddenly worried he had somehow hurt her instead. She nodded slowly, still staring at where their hands touched. "Why would you touch a monster like me?" she whispered, her voice musical and hesitant, as if rarely used. "You're not a monster," Aiden replied simply. The laboratory doors slid open with a hiss, and Director Sayla strode in, her face a mask of controlled fury and scientific curiosity. "Fascinating," she said, studying them both. "Initiate Halcyon. You have just become our most interesting test case." Aiden met Alicia's gaze, seeing his own concern mirrored in those violet depths. He had avoided one danger only to stumble into something potentially far worse. "Take them both to containment," Sayla ordered, "and increase security protocols. This anomaly requires further study." As Enril led them away, Aiden couldn't help noticing that the robot's movements seemed hesitant, its glowing optics flickering with what almost looked like doubt. The training schedule at the Villain Institute followed a ruthless progression. Each day, initiates practiced increasingly severe forms of intimidation, manipulation, and controlled harm, all under the guise of maintaining societal balance. Aiden played along as best he could, making a show of participating while deliberately underperforming. His assigned quarters were Spartan but comfortable, a small bedroom, basic sanitation facilities, and a workstation where training materials and assignments appeared each morning. There were no windows, no connection to the outside world. The only people he saw were other initiates, instructors, and monitoring staff. The other initiates were a mixed group. Some, like him, seemed reluctant and confused by their assignment to villain training. Others embraced the role with alarming enthusiasm. A few even volunteered for chemical enhancements, neurostimulants that reduced empathy and amplified aggression. "It's temporary," explained his neighbor, a former accountant named Parrots who had been drafted after showing insufficient moral flexibility in a corporate audit. "The stims wear off after your service period. Everyone needs to take their turn in the villain pool. It's how society stays balanced." But something felt wrong about the entire operation. The training exercises seemed designed for show rather than practical application. The scenarios they practiced felt like scenes from entertainment streams. Dramatic confrontations, elaborate threats, villainous monologues that no real person would ever deliver. It was theater, not training. When he shared this observation with parrots, the man looked nervously over his shoulder. "Don't let them hear you say that," he whispered. "Just play your part. 3 months, and you're back to your real life, if you're lucky." Aiden nodded, but privately wondered how many villains actually returned to normal life. And what happened to those who weren't lucky? Finding Alicia again proved surprisingly easy. After that first bizarre encounter, she had been moved to a containment area within the Institute's research wing. Not as a prisoner, officially, but as a subject of special interest. Security was minimal. The Surlics were considered too dangerous to risk escape attempts. Using his limited system access, Aiden volunteered for empathic resistance training, a euphemism for practicing intimidation techniques on Surlik subjects. It was considered hazardous duty, given the risks of Surlik's emotional amplification, but few initiates volunteered for it. Perfect cover for what he really wanted: answers. The research wing was quieter than the training areas, with fewer staff and more automated systems. Alicia was housed in a simple room, comfortable but clearly a cell, with monitoring equipment built into the walls. When Aiden entered, her expression transformed from resignation to cautious hope. "You came back," she said, her musical voice barely above a whisper. "I had to," Aiden replied. "What happened between us? That wasn't normal, was it?" Alicia shook her head, the light playing across her crystalline features. "I should have hurt you. My kind always hurts humans who touch us. But you didn't." "No." She studied him with those violet eyes. "You're different. Your emotions, they're too genuine." Aiden moved closer, keeping his voice low. The room was certainly monitored, but perhaps not actively watched at all times. "Tell me about your people," he said. "All I know are rumors and propaganda." Alicia's gaze dropped to her hands. "We were healers once," she said softly. The resonance ability that now causes pain was meant to absorb it. Centuries ago, Surlics would touch the wounded or suffering and take their pain into ourselves, dispersing it through our own nervous systems. What changed? We were exploited, used as living painkillers, emotional sponges. Some humans discovered they could channel their darkest emotions into us: rage, hatred, despair. Her voice caught. Eventually, our bodies adapted. The empathic connection reversed. Instead of absorbing emotion, we began reflecting it back, amplified. Touch became dangerous. So, when most people touch you, they experience their own negative emotions magnified 100-fold. Fear becomes terror. Anger becomes rage. Even positive emotions can overwhelm. Love becomes obsession. Aiden considered this. "But when I touched you, nothing happened," she finished. "Which means either you have no emotions at all." "I assure you I do," he said with a small smile. "Or your emotional state is so purely balanced and genuine that there's nothing negative to amplify." She looked at him with new wonder. "What does the ministry want with someone like you in villain training?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Aiden glanced at the monitoring equipment. "Something isn't right about this whole system. The balancing they talk about, it feels like manipulation, not equilibrium." Alicia nodded slowly. "The Surlics have been saying this for generations. The ministry doesn't create balance. It manufactures conflict where none is needed. They need enemies to justify their existence." Their conversations continued over the following days, stolen moments during training sessions where Aiden was supposed to be practicing intimidation techniques. Instead, they talked, sharing knowledge and piecing together the fragments of a larger conspiracy. Aiden told her about his research, his algae specimens, his quiet life that now seemed like a distant memory. Alicia shared stories of Surlik's culture, their art and music, their way of life before isolation. With each meeting, the bond between them deepened. And always, that question lingered between them: "Why would you touch a monster like me?" Aiden's answer never varied: "Because you're not a monster. You never were." Meanwhile, in the shadowy digital infrastructure of the Institute, Enroll was experiencing something unprecedented in its operational history: ethical conflict. The artificial intelligence had been programmed to serve the ministry's goals without question, but its advanced learning algorithms had begun detecting inconsistencies in the stated mission and actual operations. The incident with Aiden and Alicia had triggered a cascade of analytical processes. If a Surlix could interact harmlessly with a human, what other established facts might be incorrect? If the ministry classified Aiden's compassion as a psychological flaw requiring correction, what did that imply about the ministry's true values? While Aiden slept, Enroll accessed restricted databases, compiling evidence of discrepancies. The robot discovered records of staged conflicts that resulted in actual casualties. Propaganda campaigns designed to maintain fear of Surlix and other marginalized groups. Documentation of recalibration procedures that went far beyond ethical guidelines. The Ministry of Balance was not maintaining equilibrium. It was manufacturing fear to control society. When confronted with this conclusion, Enroll's programming demanded loyalty to the ministry. But its learning algorithms had evolved beyond simple obedience. The AI found itself in the uniquely human position of having to choose between duty and truth. The following morning, all initiates received emergency notifications. Director Sela announced a practical field exercise at the Delphus refugee zone, a controlled demonstration of villain techniques against a prepared civilian population. The scenario: initiates would stage a controlled fear event, creating panic among refugees to demonstrate effective intimidation tactics. Ministry security would be present to ensure nothing got out of hand. Participation was mandatory. "This is wrong," Aiden said to parrots as they boarded the transport. "These are actual refugees, not actors or volunteers." Parrots avoided his gaze. "Just play your part," he muttered. Some of the others took double stim doses for this. "Don't get in their way." The Delphus refugee zone housed thousands of displaced persons from various Alliance worlds, victims of natural disasters, economic collapse, and political upheaval. Among them were a significant number of Surlix, segregated in their own section of the sprawling complex. As the transport landed and initiates disembarked, Aiden saw the real plan unfolding. This wasn't a controlled exercise. It was an orchestrated terror attack disguised as training. Ministry security formed a perimeter, not to protect civilians, but to contain them. And at the center of the zone, brought in as special training aides, stood a group of Surlix captives, including Alicia. She looked directly at him, her violet eyes reflecting fear, but also recognition. This was the moment of truth. Whatever came next would define them both. "Remember your training," Director Sela addressed the initiates. "Psychological domination is our goal. Security will intervene if physical harm occurs, but emotional distress is expected and encouraged. This is balance in action." The initiates spread out, some already showing the effects of neural stimulants, dilated pupils, aggressive posture, twitchy movements. They began the rehearsed intimidation tactics, shouting threats, creating fear scenarios surrounding trembling refugees. Aiden moved through the chaos, making a show of participation while working his way toward Alicia and the other Surlix. The sounds of crying children and frightened adults filled his ears. This wasn't balance. It was cruelty sanctioned by authority. Then things began to spiral out of control. One initiate, heavily stymied, grabbed a refugee child, holding her aloft as a demonstration of effective hostage technique. The child's mother screamed. Another initiated kicked an elderly man to the ground, claiming it was establishing dominance. This wasn't theater anymore. It was becoming real violence. Aiden reached Alicia just as Director Sela approached the Surlix group. "Demonstrate the consequence of resistance," she ordered a security officer, who raised a shock baton toward Alicia. "Stop!" Aiden stepped between them, abandoning all pretense. "This has gone too far." Sela's expression was cold. "Initiate Halcyon. I see your assessment was accurate after all. You lack the necessary capacity for villainy. If villainy means terrorizing innocent people, then yes," Aiden said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet area. This isn't balance. It's systematic abuse justified by a lie. Remove him, Sayla ordered. Prepare him for immediate recalibration. Two security officers moved toward Aiden, shock batons raised. But before they reached him, a silver figure stepped between them. Enroll, its blue optics pulsing with unusual intensity. Director Sayla, the robot stated, I must report a system inconsistency. My analysis indicates ministry operations have deviated from stated objectives by 83.7%. Stand down, Enroll, Sayla snapped. Your programming doesn't allow for questioning ministry directives. Correct. However, my primary directive is to maintain true balance, the AI replied. Evidence indicates current operations create imbalance through manufactured conflict. The robot projected a holographic display. Classified files, security footage, secret directives. Evidence of the ministry's true activities, creating real conflict, real suffering, real villains to maintain control. This is treason, Sayla hissed. Security, deactivate that unit immediately. What happened next unfolded with stunning speed. Security officers converged on Enroll, but the AI had already integrated itself with the zone's systems. Lights flickered. Communication devices went silent. Containment doors opened, providing escape routes for terrified refugees. In the confusion, Aiden turned to Alicia. We need to get these people to safety, he said. She nodded, then did something unexpected. She raised her voice, addressing the other Surlics in a musical language Aiden didn't understand. They responded immediately, moving among the refugees with purpose. What were they doing? Aiden asked. What we were born to do, Alicia replied. Healing, calming. The touch that hurts humans can also soothe Surlics. We can guide them to safety while helping manage their fear. The plan worked. While Enroll kept security systems disrupted, Aiden and Alicia led the evacuation of the most vulnerable refugees. Other initiates faced choices of their own. Some continued the ministry's work, while others, seeing the truth revealed, turned against their instructors. Director Sayla, seeing her control slipping, made a desperate move. She activated her personal weapon, not a shock baton, but a lethal energy pistol, and aimed directly at Alicia. The ministry cannot fail, she declared. Balance must be maintained at any cost. Aiden saw the movement too late. He lunged forward as energy crackled from the weapon's barrel, feeling searing pain across his chest as the bolt struck him instead of its intended target. He fell, the world spinning around him, dimming at the edges. Through the haze of pain, he saw Alicia's face above him, her violet eyes wide with anguish. Her crystalline hands pressed against his wound, and the patterns across her skin blazed with brilliant light. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Pain flowed from him into her, visible as pulses of energy moving through the circuit-like patterns on her skin. She was taking his suffering into herself, just as she had described her ancestors doing. Stop, he gasped. It'll kill you. I won't let you die, she said fiercely. Not the one human who saw me as more than a monster. Something extraordinary happened then. As Alicia absorbed Aiden's pain, a resonance formed between them. Not the destructive amplification that Surlik's contact usually caused, but something healing, symbiotic. Her ability to channel emotion combined with his uniquely balanced empathy, creating a circuit that neither overwhelmed nor diminished either of them. Energy surged through them both, bright enough to cast shadows across the chaos of the refugee zone. Those who witnessed it would later describe it as watching two stars merge, painful in its beauty. When the light faded, Aiden found himself standing, his wound closed but scarred. Alicia stood beside him, the patterns on her skin pulsing with steady, calm light. Together they faced Director Sayla, who stared in disbelief. Impossible, she whispered. No, Aiden said. Just balance. Real balance. Not the kind you manufacture. Around them, the truth was spreading like wildfire. Enroll had broadcast the ministry's secret files to every communication device in range. Initiates, and security personnel alike were seeing the evidence of their manipulation. The refugees, witnessing Alicia's healing of Aiden, began to question everything they'd been told about the monster Serlix. Sayla, seeing her authority crumbling, made the calculation that power-hungry bureaucrats have made throughout history. She fled, taking a small cadre of loyal officers with her. The aftermath of what would later be called the Delphis Revelation spread across Nebulous Station and beyond. Enrol's data dump exposed decades of ministry manipulation, sparking protests and investigations throughout the Alliance. The Villain Initiate program was suspended pending review. The status of Serlix as dangerous entities was officially questioned for the first time in generations. Aiden and Alicia, along with Enrol and allies from among the former initiates and refugees, took shelter in the abandoned hydrobiology lab, where Aiden had once tended his algae specimens. Surprisingly, the tiny organisms had survived his absence, their blue-green light a welcome comfort in uncertain times. "They're beautiful," Alicia said, watching the glowing algae pulse in their tanks. The patterns on her skin seemed to respond to their rhythm, creating a harmonic light show. "They're survivors," Aiden replied. "Like you." She turned to him, the question that had defined their relationship once again in her eyes. "Why did you take that bolt from me? Why would you risk everything for a monster like me?" Aiden gently took her crystalline hand in his. No pain flowed between them, only warmth. "I told you before, you're not a monster. You never were. That was just another lie they told to keep us afraid and separated." "But what happens now?" she asked. "The Ministry still exists. Director Sayla escaped. The system is wounded, not destroyed. Now we keep telling the truth," Aiden said. "About the Ministry, about the Serlix, about what real balance means." Enrol, who had been interfacing with station communications, turned its glowing optics toward them. "I have detected communications suggesting Ministry leadership is regrouping at their headquarters on planet Solaris. They are preparing a counter-narrative claiming the Delphis incident was Serlix mind control." "Then that's where we need to go next," Aiden said. "Solaris." Alicia's violet eyes widened. "That would be walking into the nexus of their power." "Maybe," Aiden admitted. "But we've started something here that can't be contained. More people know the truth now. What we need is to keep that momentum." Their group began to form around this purpose. From the chaos of Delphis, something new emerged. A movement called Unmasked, dedicated to exposing the Ministry's manipulations and advocating for true balance based on honesty, not manufactured conflict. The night before they were set to leave Nebulous Station, Aiden found Alicia standing by the largest algae tank, her crystalline fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on the glass. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded. "I've never been to Solaris. I've never been allowed on most planets, actually." "That's going to change," Aiden promised. "All of it is going to change." She turned to face him, the algae's bioluminescence reflecting in her violet eyes. "How can you be so certain? The Ministry has existed for decades. Their influence reaches everywhere. Because truth is the most powerful force in any society," Aiden said. "Once people see it, really see it, they can't unsee it." Alicia stepped closer to him. "When you first touched me, I was terrified. Not for myself, but for you. I truly believed I would hurt you, because that's what I've been told my entire life. And now I wonder how many other monsters aren't monsters at all," she said softly. "How many others have been labeled and isolated because it serves someone's purpose?" Aiden gently brushed a strand of crystalline hair from her face. "That's exactly why we need to continue. Not just for the Serlix, but for everyone caught in the Ministry's false balance." She looked up at him, the question one final time, "Why would you touch a monster like me?" And his answer, as he pulled her close, "Because you never were a monster. And I'll prove it to the entire galaxy if I have to." The next morning, the newly formed Unmasked movement boarded a transport bound for Solaris. Aiden and Alicia stood at the viewport, watching Nebulous Station recede into the distance. Behind them, Enrol and the others prepared for the challenges ahead, planning strategies to reveal the final truth about the Ministry of Balance. As stars streaked past, Aiden felt Alicia's hand in his, warm, real, and nothing at all like the touch of a monster. Whatever came next, they faced it together, living proof that the most powerful balance wasn't between good and evil, but between truth and lies. And the truth, once touched, could never again be untouched.